On the night of July 22, 1991, a terrified man named Tracy Edwards flagged down a Milwaukee police cruiser. Handcuffed and pleading for help, he led the officers back to a brick building at 924 North 25th Street, the Oxford Apartments. Inside apartment 213, there was no shouting, no struggle. The first reporter on the scene later described an unnerving, absolute silence. The living space looked like a typical, sparsely-furnished bachelor pad, except for a thick, nauseating stench of chemicals and rotting meat that clung to the air. Searching for evidence to corroborate Edwards' story, an officer opened the refrigerator. There, sitting neatly on the bottom shelf, was a freshly severed human head. The occupant of the apartment, a soft-spoken 31-year-old, fought briefly before being wrestled to the ground in cuffs. The discovery in apartment 213 was the start of an investigation that would eventually reveal just how long a predator had been allowed to operate in the open. Between 1978 and 1991, Jeffrey Dahmer murdered 17 men and boys. After his first murder at age 18, he didn't kill again for a decade. But zooming into the last 14 months, the frequency accelerates. From May 1990 to July 1991, he slaughtered 11 people. The men he targeted were almost entirely from Milwaukee's gay community, and 15 of the 17 were men of color, predominantly Black, Hispanic, and Laotian. Dahmer targeted men who were already marginalized, often picking them up in the same few neighborhoods. During this 13-year period, 17 people disappeared, but until this night, not a single alarm had been raised by the city. Dismantling the crime scene required a response closer to a hazardous materials disaster. Forensic teams painstakingly cataloged 74 Polaroid photographs of dismembered bodies, multiple preserved skulls in a filing cabinet, and a blue 57-gallon drum filled with acid and human torsos. Dahmer lured his targets from local bathhouses and gay bars. He offered them cash to pose for photos or have a drink at his apartment. Once inside, he served them alcohol laced with a heavy dose of halcyon, a powerful sleeping pill. He then attempted grotesque surgical procedures. He drilled holes into his victims' skulls and injected caustic acids directly into their brains. His stated goal was to induce a permanent, mindless state, creating living zombies who would yield to his complete command. The evidence revealed a fractured mind. He was highly organized when it came to chemical disposal and preserving specific bones as trophies. Yet he was completely disorganized in other moments, leaving decomposing remains out in the open on his bedroom mattress. Apartment 213 operated as a macabre laboratory. Every chemical purchased and every procedure attempted was engineered toward a single terrifying obsession: maintaining absolute physical control over another human being. The court-appointed psychiatrists spent hours interviewing him. They diagnosed him with extreme alcoholism, necrophilia, a sexual fixation on corpses, and borderline personality disorder, a condition marked by severe emotional instability. When you look at this chart plotting his traits against a classic psychopath like Ted Bundy, the differences are sharp. Bundy relied on superficial charm to manipulate victims. Dahmer was socially awkward, deeply withdrawn, and suffered from extreme emotional dependency. His primary psychological driver was a profound, pathological fear of abandonment. He could not handle the moment a partner wanted to leave his apartment, so he murdered and preserved them to guarantee they would stay with him permanently. At trial, the defense team argued these overlapping disorders and compulsions meant he was legally insane, that he literally could not stop himself from killing. The prosecution laid out a different reality. They showed that he consistently covered his tracks, used aliases, and lied seamlessly to police officers to evade capture. These actions required cognitive awareness. He knew his actions were wrong. He simply didn't want to get caught. A desperate fear of isolation, fused with severe, untreated personality disorders, fueled his actions. It was a lethal, calculated compulsion, but under the law, he was entirely sane. That legal sanity was heavily subsidized by the very people supposed to stop him. The most glaring failure occurred 2 months before his arrest, in May 1991, when 14-year-old Laotian boy Konarak Synthesomphone managed to escape the apartment. Bleeding and drugged, the boy was found naked in the street by neighbors. When police arrived, The killer calmly explained that the boy was an adult, claiming a lover's quarrel. The officers dismissed the scene and accepted his story immediately. Several black female bystanders pleaded with the officers, insisting the boy was in grave danger. The officers ignored them, threatened them with arrest, and escorted the drugged boy back inside. He was murdered shortly after they left. These officers acted within the culture of a police department that spent the 1980s routinely harassing the gay community and dismissing minority voices. The Synthesum phone incident illustrates how the spree was sustained. Prejudices regarding the victim's race and sexuality overrode the obvious signs of a crime, providing the killer with a shield he never had to build for himself. In early 1992, a trial jury formally rejected the insanity defense. Jeffrey Dahmer was convicted of 16 counts of first-degree murder and sentenced to 16 consecutive life terms, totaling 941 years in prison. He would serve less than 3. On November 28, 1994, he was bludgeoned to death by fellow inmate Christopher Scarver while cleaning a prison bathroom. But his death provided little closure. The city of Milwaukee was left with deep, agonizing scars. Grieving families and marginalized communities took to the streets, demanding accountability from a justice system that had ignored their missing sons for over a decade. While the crimes were the work of a uniquely disturbed mind, the sheer duration of the horror points to a much broader failure. When a society actively chooses to look the other way, it creates invisible people and leaves them waiting for a predator in the dark.